So here's the thing. In the world of missing person cases, hikers vanish more often than you'd think. It sounds unbelievable, right? But it's true. Every year, in national parks, along rugged mountain trails, and deep inside remote forests, people go missing. Sometimes there's an explanation. Maybe they got injured, maybe the weather turned, maybe they underestimated how far they had to go. But other times, there isn't. Other times, the story just stops, and nobody knows why. And this case, this one is different. It doesn't just stop, it feels like it was cut off mid-sentence, because the guy we're talking about wasn't just some random hiker blending in with the woods. No, he was wearing a bright red jacket. Like we're talking fire engine red, the kind of color that screams for attention, the kind of color you'd expect to be impossible to miss out there in the greens, browns, and grays of the wilderness. And yet, he was never seen again. Think about that for a second. No jacket lying off the trail, no backpack tossed aside, no gear scattered around, nothing that could explain where he went or what happened. It was as if the forest swallowed him whole. That's why the story of the missing hiker in the red jacket still bothers people years later. It's not just another disappearance. It's not just bad luck or bad timing. It feels like the perfect storm of unanswered questions and chilling details. The kind of story that gets passed around by hikers late at night. The kind of story locals whisper about because it still doesn't make sense. And maybe that's why this case refuses to fade away. Because if someone can vanish while wearing the most noticeable color possible, what does that say about the rest of us who step into the woods thinking we'll always make it back? So, who was this guy? For the sake of privacy, I'm not dropping a real name here because stories like this have been retold in different ways across forums and reports. Let's just call him Daniel. He was in his late 20s, outdoorsy but not reckless. Not the kind of person you'd label as careless or unprepared. He liked being outside, but he wasn't out there trying to prove anything extreme. He was the kind of hiker who respected the trails and usually kept his trips well within his limits. Daniel planned a weekend hike in a popular trail network. This wasn't some forgotten wilderness spot with no maps or guidance. It was the kind of place people go every season. The trails were well marked, dotted with signs, and had multiple entry and exit points. On weekends, it wasn't unusual to pass half a dozen other hikers every couple of miles. In other words, not exactly middle of nowhere. He told his friends and family about the trip, which was something he always did. He wasn't careless. He left at a reasonable time in the morning, packed all the basics: food, water, a flashlight, a map, and even a small emergency kit. He had done this sort of hike plenty of times before, and there was nothing about this particular trail that suggested danger. And yes, he wore that red bright jacket. You'll see why that detail matters so much in a second. That jacket wasn't just a fashion choice. It was practical. Hikers wear red or orange for visibility. In case of an emergency, that color makes it easier for search and rescue teams to spot someone from a distance, whether on the ground or from the air. It was one of the smartest pieces of gear Daniel brought with him. He started his hike on a cool autumn morning. Weather reports said clear skies, little chilly, nothing dangerous. The kind of crisp air that makes you feel awake and energized. Perfect hiking weather. Witnesses later confirmed seeing him on the trail. Some said they passed him near the trailhead, others further up along a ridge. A few even said they remembered him specifically because of the jacket. It stood out like a signal flare among the greens and browns of the forest. You can imagine how much that color must have popped against the landscape. And then, sometime in the afternoon, he just disappeared. No one heard a cry for help. No one saw him step off the trail. No one reported seeing him stop to rest or turn around. It was as if the path had swallowed him whole between one witness spotting him and the next. And when he didn't check in that evening, his family assumed maybe he had stayed longer on the trail than expected. By the following morning, when he still hadn't made contact, concern turned into alarm. Calls were made, park officials got involved, a search was organized almost immediately. And here's where the story takes its strange turn. Because you'd think a bright red jacket would be impossible to miss. Planes flew overhead, drones were used, teams spread out through the woods, combing the paths, the ridges, the small streams that cut through the area. Search dogs were brought in. Volunteers covered miles and miles of terrain. And yet, nothing. Not a single trace of Daniel. No jacket, no backpack, no gear, no footprints that could be confidently tied to him. Nothing. That's the detail that still keeps people up awake at night. In the outdoors, when someone disappears, usually there's something. A piece of clothing snagged on a branch, a water bottle, a map or a bag dropped in a panic. But in Daniel's case, there was none of that. It was as if he had stepped off the map entirely, leaving no proof he had ever been there past that last confirmed sighting. And it wasn't for lack of effort. The search went on for days. Helicopters hovered low. Thermal cameras scanned the forest for heat signatures. Entire lines of people walked shoulder to shoulder through brush so thick they had to hack their way forward. Still, no sign. The more time passed, the stranger it got. How could a man in the red jacket simply vanish in an area where dozens of people had been hiking the same day? How could he leave no trace at all? And why did every search effort, no matter how thorough, come up empty? That's when theories started forming. Because when logic fails, people look for explanations, no matter how unlikely. And with Daniel's case, explanations are hard to come by. When Daniel didn't come home, his family called the Rangers right away. They weren't the type to panic over nothing, but they knew him. If he said he'd be back, he would be back. Something was wrong. And within hours, search and rescue was mobilized. Teams were on the ground almost immediately, which is actually rare. In a lot of missing hiker cases, there's a delay before a full-scale operation gets rolling. But here, the call was taken seriously from the start. Dogs were brought in. Drones flew overhead, scanning the trails and tree lines. Helicopters circled with spotters, using binoculars and thermal imaging cameras. Ground teams lined up in grids, moving slowly and carefully to cover every inch of terrain. If you've ever watched a search and rescue op in action, you know it's thorough. They don't just wander around randomly. They map out sectors, mark off areas that have been checked, and follow the natural paths a lost person might take. Ridgelines, valleys, streams. If someone's injured or disoriented, chances are they'll end up near water. That's why rivers and creeks are always checked first. And in this case, rescuers thought they had an advantage. Because again, the jacket. Red isn't just a random clothing choice in the wilderness. It's the color picked specifically for visibility. It's supposed to stand out like a flare against the deep greens and browns of a forest. Even in fog or low light, red reflects and catches the eye. From the sky, it should have been the easiest thing in the world to spot. But somehow, despite all of that, hundreds of volunteers, seasoned professionals, high-tech equipment, the search teams came back empty. Day after day, nothing.
No jacket, no footprints, no gear, not scraps of fabric, not even a crushed patch of grass that could hint at where he might have rested. It was as if Daniel had stepped off the trail and melted into the trees. The strangeness of it wasn't lost on the rescuers. They'd done this before. They'd found hikers in ravines, injured climbers tucked beneath outcroppings, even lost kids hiding under fallen logs. Usually there's at least something, a breadcrumb, a sign, a clue. But here, nothing. The woods were silent, almost too clean, as if he had never been there to begin with. And that's what made the whole situation harder to accept. Because we're not talking about rugged, untouched wilderness where a person could vanish for weeks before anyone stumbled across them. This was a popular trail system, one with people walking it every day. During the time Daniel disappeared, there were other hikers in the same area. Families, solo travelers, couples taking photos of the fall colors. And yet not one of them reported hearing a cry for help. Not one saw a figure in red moving through the trees. For his family, it was agonizing. They came out every day, waiting for news, holding on to hope that maybe he'd just gotten turned around and would come walking out of the forest with a story to tell. But with each passing hour, hope slipped further away. By the end of the first week, the official operation had expanded its radius. The assumption was that if Daniel had wandered off, maybe he had covered more ground than anyone expected. Teams pushed deeper into the forest, into areas hikers didn't usually travel. Still nothing. The red jacket that should have been visible from a mile away might as well have never existed. And here's where the case starts to drift from just tragic into unexplainable. Because in almost every missing hiker case, time eventually reveals something. Maybe not answers, but at least evidence. A boot, a water bottle, a scrap of torn clothing. But Daniel's case refused to give even that. It was as if the forest had closed around him and left no trace behind. People in the search teams later admitted something that still sticks with them. They said that no matter how carefully they looked, the woods felt strange. Like the deeper they went, the more it felt like they were searching for someone who wasn't really there anymore.
Now, this is where it starts to get creepy. Several hikers came forward later saying they did see someone in a red jacket that day. At first, that sounded like the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. Finally, eyewitness accounts. But the deeper investigators looked into it, the less sense it made. The problem? The sightings don't line up. One couple swore they passed Daniel going uphill hours after he should have already been past that section of the trail. According to his timeline, he couldn't have been there. He would have had to backtrack miles without anyone else noticing. And remember, this wasn't a deserted trail. People were walking it all day. Another hiker, an experienced outdoorsman, claimed he saw a flash of red way off trail, deep in a section of the forest where there were no marked paths. He thought it was odd because there's no reason for anyone to be wandering that far out. It was dense, rugged terrain, the kind of place you'd only go if you were completely lost or deliberately avoiding being found. And then there's the strangest report of all. Someone else insisted they saw the red jacket at dusk, leaning against a tree, almost like a person was standing still, watching. But when they blinked, adjusted their focus, and looked again, it was gone. Nothing there. No movement, no sound, just empty woods. So,
What do you do with accounts like these? Could it have been tricks of the light? Sure, the forest at sunset can play with your eyes. The way leaves shift, the way shadows stretch, it's easy to think you're seeing a splash of color where there isn't one. Mistaken identity is possible too. Maybe another hiker just happened to be wearing a red windbreaker. But when three separate people, none of them connected, give strange, conflicting accounts on the same day, it makes you wonder. And here's the ticker. When search and rescue followed up on those reported locations, they came back empty every time. No footprints, no dropped gear, no sign of human activity at all. It was as if the red jacket appeared for a moment and then dissolved into thin air. That's when the whispers started. Among the volunteers, among the locals, even among a few of the rangers. They wouldn't put it on record, but you can guess what they were thinking. Stories about the forest having thin places, spots where reality feels different, places where people see things that aren't supposed to be there. Some even said the jacket itself became like a symbol, a beacon that flickered in and out of existence, luring people deeper into the woods. Whether it was Daniel or something else entirely, no one could say for sure. But it gave the case a chilling new layer. Not only was he missing, but even the sightings of him didn't make sense. And the strangest part? Those reports never stopped. Even weeks after the official search ended, random hikers kept telling the same story. I thought I saw someone in red, but when I got closer, there was nothing. So, let's break down the main theories that swirl around this case. 1. The classic, he got lost. The simplest explanation is always that he got lost. Maybe he strayed off trail, fell, got injured, and nature covered his tracks. But here's the issue. Search and rescue combed that area so thoroughly they should have found something. Even months later, when leaves fell and snow melted, there was nothing. Usually you find gear, scraps of clothing, or eventually remains. But here, zero. 2. The predator theory. Some whisper about wild animals. But again, even in predator cases, you usually find torn clothing or signs of a struggle. And if it was an animal encounter, it still doesn't explain how trained searchers with dogs missed every trace. 3. The stranger danger theory. A few people think someone else was out there. Maybe foul play. Maybe he crossed paths with the wrong person at the wrong time. It's possible. But then, where's the evidence? No drag marks, no disturbed soil, no dropped gear. Plus, most foul play leaves a trail. This one didn't. 4. The paranormal angle. And yeah, this is the one that keeps people talking. Some folks believe the red jacket wasn't seen multiple times by mistake. It was seen multiple times because it wasn't Daniel anymore. That something else was out there, wearing the red jacket like a signal. People on forums talk about glitches, thin spots in reality, or even mimicry. Whatever you believe, it's hard to shake that eerie consistency, the red jacket showing up over and over, but never where it should have been. Here's another weird layer to this story. And honestly, it's one of those details that makes the whole case feel like it belongs in some kind of urban legend collection. When online sleuths and armchair investigators dug deeper into old reports, they noticed a pattern that feels almost too strange to ignore. Turns out, multiple hikers who vanished over the years were last seen wearing brightly colored jackets, and more often than not, the jackets were red. Now, let's pause here. Could this be pure coincidence? Of course. Red is a popular outdoor color for a reason. It's bright, it stands out against the greens and browns of the forest, and it's supposed to make you easier to find in case something goes wrong. Logically, it makes sense that plenty of missing hikers would have been wearing red. But here's the thing. When you start lining up those cases side by side, it doesn't feel random anymore. It starts to feel like a repeating pattern. The missing hiker in Oregon, red jacket. The guy who went off trail in the Rockies and was never found, red parka. The woman who vanished on a well-traveled path in Vermont, red fleece. Different states, different years, different circumstances, yet that color keeps coming back. And for some people, that detail changes everything. If you're practical, you'll shrug and say it's just a coincidence, nothing more. But if you're even a little bit superstitious, the whole thing takes on a darker edge. It's almost like the color red has become a symbol in missing hiker lore. Some say red doesn't just attract rescuers, it attracts attention from other things. Theories range from the paranormal to the psychological. Maybe the color draws the eye in a way that tricks people into seeing things that aren't really there, like those strange red jacket sightings in Daniel's case. Or maybe it's tied to something older, local legends, cultural associations, the way red has always symbolized danger, warning, or blood in folklore across the world. Think about it. People already talk about forests as if they're alive, like they have their own moods, their own secrets. So what if the forest notices the color red differently than we do? What if instead of making you safe and visible, it makes you stand out to something you don't actually want noticing you? Even more unsettling, some hikers claim that after hearing about this so-called red jacket curse, they started avoiding red gear altogether. Outdoor forums have threads where people flat out say, "I'll never hike in red, it feels like bad luck." It's not just ghost stories, it's shaping real choices people make before they step onto a trail. And here's the kicker. In Daniel's case, the red jacket wasn't just a piece of clothing, it became the detail everyone fixated on. Witnesses remembered it, search teams searched for it, and online sleuths obsessed over it. Yet in the end, the one thing that should have made him easy to find became the most haunting mystery of all. It's like the jacket itself turned into a symbol, not just of Daniel's disappearance, but of how the forest can swallow someone whole, even when they're dressed in the brightest color possible.
Dig a little deeper, and you'll find that the place where Daniel disappeared wasn't just any section of trail. The area already had a reputation, and locals had been whispering about it long before his case ever made headlines. Hikers trade stories about hearing strange humming in the woods, a kind of low, droning sound that seems to have no source. Some say it comes and goes in waves, like it's moving around them. Others describe it as almost mechanical, like a distant generator, except there are no cabins, no roads, no equipment anywhere near that part of the forest. And then there are the reports of lights. People talk about faint glowing orbs drifting between the trees, just far enough away that you can't tell what they really are.
Some hikers have said they've tried to follow them, thinking maybe it was another person's headlamp, only to realize they were walking in circles. Or worse, deeper into parts of the forest with no trail at all. Echoes are another theme. A few solo hikers claim that they've heard what sounded like voices, faint conversations just out of reach. When they called out, the voices would stop or shift, like they were being carried further into the trees. Some insist it wasn't just echoes. The way they describe it, it felt like something wanted them to follow, to step off the safety of the path. Of course, skeptics have their explanations. They'll tell you the humming could be wind caught between the ridges, the lights might be fireflies or reflections, and the voices are nothing more than echoes bouncing off canyon walls. Logical, right? And honestly, most of the time, that's probably true. Nature has a way of tricking our senses, especially when we're tired, cold, and isolated. But here's the thing that nags at you. Not everyone who hears those sounds or sees those lights comes back to tell their story. Some hikers vanish, just like Daniel. And the unsettling part, the details line up across different accounts, different people, different years, yet the same reports of humming, of flickering lights, of echoes that feel too intentional. It's almost like that section of the forest has a personality, or maybe even a presence. A place where the normal rules bend just a little, where reality feels thin. And if you're unlucky enough to wander through at the wrong time, wearing the wrong thing, or following the wrong sound, maybe you don't make it back out. That's why when Daniel disappeared, a lot of locals weren't shocked. Saddened, yes. Disturbed, definitely. But surprised? Not really. For them, it felt like the forest had claimed another one.
Daniel's case eventually went cold. No new leads came in, no breakthroughs, no discoveries, nothing. His family did everything they could, held candlelight vigils, plastered posters around nearby towns, and begged for answers on local news stations. But as the months turned into years, the hope for closure slowly faded. The official line on record became brutally simple. Missing, presumed gone. For his family, that phrase was devastating. It's one thing to lose someone and know what happened. It's another thing entirely to live in limbo, never sure if you should grieve or keep searching. Every phone call could be news. Every knock on the door could be the moment they'd waited for. And yet, it never was. But while the official story ended there, hikers who know the case will tell you it didn't really end. The memory of Daniel lingers on those trails. His name still comes up in online forums, shared as a cautionary tale for anyone thinking about hiking alone. And then there are the sightings. More than one person has claimed that while hiking late in the afternoon, they caught sight of something strange, a quick flash of red weaving between the trees. Not close enough to see detail, not long enough to chase down, just a glimpse, like a jacket moving where no one should be. Some brush it off as other hikers, sure, but others say it felt different, that when they went to check, the trail was empty. No footprints, no movement, just silence. It's the kind of detail that makes your stomach drop. Because what are you really seeing? Another person out on the trail? A trick of the light through autumn leaves? Or something that wants to be seen, but never found? And maybe that's the reason Daniel's story refuses to fade. It lingers in conversations, in podcasts, in late-night campfire talks because it feels unfinished. It feels like a story cut short with chapters missing. People can't stop talking about it because deep down we all hate loose ends. The truth is, nobody knows what really happened out there. Maybe we never will. But the uncertainty is exactly what keeps people coming back to the mystery. It's not just about one missing hiker. It's about the possibility that some places hold secrets bigger than we're ready to understand. And that's why years later, when people set out to hike that same trail, they carry Daniel's story with them. A silent reminder that even the brightest red jacket isn't always enough to bring you home.
So what do you think happened to the missing hiker in the red jacket? Was it a tragic accident? A crime? Or did he stumble into something we don't have words for? Personally, I think it's the not knowing that makes it stick. The red jacket should have been the easiest clue in the world. Instead, it became the strangest part of the mystery. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the story. If you liked this deep dive into the unknown, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more creepy mysteries, unsolved cases, and bizarre stories coming your way. And trust me, you don't want to miss them. And remember, if you have your own strange or creepy story, send it in. Emails down below. Who knows? The next video could be about your experience. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.